Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's Friday night on talkTV, and what better place to be than right here with me, Mike Graham, and this great panel that I've got about to introduce to you now. I've got Howard Cox with me here, who's still running for Mayor of London. We've got Candice Holdsworth, commentator on talkTV. Will Geddes, security specialist, man of international mystery, and Rebecca Twomey, of course, as well, providing what can only be described as the beauty and the brains for the show. Here we are. This is what we're going to be giving them if they win it. Plank of the Week. And I don't know where to start, but I'm sure Howard does. Howard, who's your first nomination?
Well, hello. Again, I always say this. I'm not presenting Sadiq Khan. You'll be pleased to know about
I'm amazed at that, actually, because I was expecting Sadiq Khan, to be honest. I mean, he's been in the news all week. Just in 1 week, he's not going to get on Plank of the Week.
Well, I'm actually talking to one of his employees. It's the head of the police.
Oh, yes.
Sir Mark Rowley.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm afraid, you know, he's going to step up.
He's not having a good week, is he?
He's not. He should step up the plate. We've seen what's happened in Parliament Square. I was walking through Parliament Square when these terrible things happened, and the things I'm talking about is one, you saw people running around with masks on, which is illegal. You saw one of a reporter being hit with an egg and that sort of thing, all that sort of thing. And you saw this massive projection, this laser projection onto the Elizabeth Tower, which houses Big Ben. And this
From
is
the river to the sea.
Exactly. And the point is, all of these things are illegal, not just what they were saying in terms of the hate speech, but you're now not allowed to project onto a government building. And guess what? I went to the policeman and spoke to the police, and they said, "What are you going to do about it?" He says, they didn't."
Could you see where it was being projected from?
Oh yes, it's coming from a little fence right down by the.
So you could identify where it was.
And it's only a little device, a little thing. I probably Will knows about these sorts of things, but I'm not joking. I'd love to have the device. It's incredible, but it's this laser beam. It's very accurate, and what is the big thing for me is that he should actually now come out, Mark Rowley, and say that actually he's either running a police force or he's running a kindergarten.
Yes.
And that's the thing.
What he likes to do, and what the Metropolitan Police love doing, is explaining to everybody why something that you thought was a crime actually isn't a crime. They did it when they first heard the chants of From the River to the Sea on these marches back in October, when they started chanting for jihad. The Metropolitan Police went to great lengths to explain that, well, you know, jihad doesn't always mean holy war. It doesn't always mean that they're terrorists. Doesn't always mean that they're, you know, maniacs. They might just be wanting to be better Muslims.
But there are obvious crimes being committed. That's the point. The projection onto a public building is not allowed.
They said that wasn't a crime as well, though. They came out with an explainer saying on Twitter, in some circumstances this would be considered a crime, but given in the context of the fact that it's a public protest, it's not a crime. You're going, what? How is it not a crime?
The thing that baffles me, though, and I mean, Howard's got such valid points here, is that ignorance is not a defence in the law.
No.
And the whole river to the sea, nobody can claim ignorance in exactly what that means. That's a call for genocide of the Israel and all the people contained within it, and probably including all the Palestinians that live there and all the Arabs that live there. The fact of the matter is that that's being projected up there. That's an incitement to violence.
Yes.
Mark Rowley needs to give his head a serious wobble, because at the moment, the whole morale and knowing a lot of people in the Metropolitan Police, and I used to have a lot of respect for Mark Rowley, did enormous things and great things in counter-terrorism, but he seems to have lost the plot. And Khan seems to be the tail that's wagging the dog right now.
Well, because Sadiq Khan very rarely puts out any kind of message at all about these marches. You know, he puts out messages about everything else. Puts out messages about, you know, it's the first Monday in spring or something like that, and he'll tell you exactly how great he is at building houses, which he's not. But he won't say anything about these weekly events, which are now causing ridiculous problems for the police and for everybody in London.
Well, he's quick to come out about Lee Anderson, isn't he? Isn't that funny about that one?
Right.
But when it comes to do with this Palestinian situation in terms of actually these protests, he's very quiet.
Yeah.
And what everyone's talking about now is the sort of where we're going from the right to protest, free speech, you know, freedom of assemblage, into intimidation and mob-like behaviour.
Right.
And it seems like it's crossing the line now.
Well, Rishi
Sunak
Sunak has finally said that he wants to try and rule out mob behaviour, but he's 4 months too late, isn't he?
He is completely late. And the 31 million that has been raised, obviously, for MP security and has now been sanctioned, you know, that's just a tip of the iceberg. And it's based off the back of people like Tobias Ellwood having Palestinian protesters outside his home. You know, that we are in a state of emergency, I think, in terms of us potentially being on the edges of civil civil war.
I think there's going to be street riots because, you know, the police are going to try and stop these people and they're not going to want to be stopped. Rebecca?
And talking about this mob culture, let's just think what happens on Twitter. If someone puts out hate speech on Twitter, you've got the police at your front door. They're very quick to act, the police, aren't they, when it's not a physical problem for them. When they can just, you know, turn up at your door and say, oh, naughty, you wrote too much on Twitter.
And they turn up like mob-handed as well.
Yeah, when it's very serious. You know, 1999, Gail Porter, her naked image was projected by FHM onto the Houses of Parliament. Some people deem that offensive. That's a different debate. But that's a quarter of a century ago that happened. And they still can't prevent something being projected onto the Houses of Parliament. Well, this is insane.
It sounds amazing.
The police was right by that projector. Right. I saw him.
Well, that's the thing that's astonishing. Let's see whether they're going to go after Charlotte Church. This is what her contribution to plankery was this week. Voice of an angel.
Yeah.
Hey? Yeah. I mean, I kid you not. I mean,
that is just the most disgusting thing
I know.
I've seen.
Unbelievable. Anyway.
Jarring.
But I don't think anyone has done anything about that. You know, incredibly.
It's a call for genocide.
Yeah.
It's quite simple. You know, there's no misunderstanding like jihad, which is supposedly interpretation.
Charlotte Church's next album, Jihad. Live from Cardiff.
Live from Cardiff.
Anyway, let's move on. Mary Poppins. Amazing that she would make it on.
I know. So it's not exactly Mary Poppins, but it is the Film Classification Board, in their infinite wisdom, have decided to rate Mary Poppins as PG.
Right.
Which, I mean, I think is the first time ever anyone would have suggested that such a film needed parental guidance. And the reason for that is because they said it has words in it, the old-fashioned words, that could be deemed offensive.
Yes. Words which most of us have no clue about.
No, but that's the thing. I mean, it's been going for years. I mean, these words were there when I was a child. Even when I was a child, you really didn't pay much attention to it because you didn't know what it meant. And also, you know, I mean, most people know these words in context, that's what people used at that time. But no one uses those words now.
Well, the Metropolitan Police, to be fair, would say in context these words are okay.
Policing that.
But, you know, it's crazy.
But can we say what words they are?
Yes.
What words are they?
Well, it's Hottentot.
Hottentot, I regularly use.
It's a Victorian word. It's a very old Victorian word. No one uses it now. I mean, everyone who sees it goes, well, that's the word that they used at that time. But it's very interesting because this is all going on at a time when there's a lot of reporting going on about how much less resilient children are these days. And, you know, there's all this, you know, anxiety in young people. And a lot of it is to do with adults suffocating them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adults constantly trying to protect them from everything all the time, instead of sort of treating them as if they could handle being a little bit offended or encountering a word that's maybe slightly offensive.
Yes, but now they can't watch Mary Poppins on their own. They have to have a parent with them. Let's have a look at the offending clip.
We being attacked by Hottentots! Aye, aye, sir. Cheeky devils! Give them what for! Empty those shot knuckles! Aye, aye, sir!
I mean, it's quite funny, isn't it? They're more offended about calling them Hottentots than actually killing them.
Yeah.
Killing them's fine. As long as you don't call them by the wrong name.
Or what about the child labour, you know, Victorian chimney sweeps? Let's just gloss over that. And it feels that they're never opening up. It's quite patronising in a way to say, like, children are going to repeat some of the language that they hear and it's offensive or it's wrong. But there's no discussion about parents maybe watching these films. Mary Poppins, I think, was a film you watched as a family. And you could discuss things with your parent. You could say, what does that word mean, mummy? And you can talk about why it's offensive, why it's not the correct terminology anymore, why it's in the history books. Because if you start eradicating language, we're never going to learn. We're never going to know.
I must admit, I don't remember the word at all. I mean, I don't really remember. I mean, none of my kids...
Excuse my ignorance. What does Hottentot mean?
Yeah, I know. I think it's a reference to some sort of former tribal thing.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, nobody really knows because it's such a long time ago. The most offensive thing for me in the Mary Poppins film was Dick Van Dyke's Cockney accent.
I know.
He should have been locked up for that. It was unbelievably bad. But the thing is, you know, we're faced with these ludicrous things as if everybody knows exactly what they're doing. And nobody knows what they're talking about. I don't think anyone this week had seen Mary Poppins recently enough to remember what the phrase was. I never particularly my kids hated it. I couldn't get any of them to watch the film at all because it's so old-fashioned. You know,
I liked Mary Poppins. I have never watched The Sound of Music though. Never watched
Sound of
that.
Music's good, but it's got
Really?
Nazis in it, so you've got to be careful.
Okay.
Wow.
There's a warning as well.
That's
They say
gonna
they
be-
now
that'll
warn
be
you.
X-rated
They now
soon.
warn you. There was a musical version of it put on somewhere like Exeter, and they put a warning on the poster. May contain Nazis.
I knew
May
a high
contain nuts. Is that like may contain nuts?
I knew
a high school production of it where they erased the Nazis.
Really?
And they just had these soldiers march across the stage, which
Oh, right.
was totally confusing. You had no idea
No
what was
swastikas
going
or anything
on.
like that?
Nothing. No, because they didn't want to frighten the children.
Not allowed that.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Can't scare the kiddies.
Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, Will, my favourite newspaper up next.
Oh,
for
I
you.
know, and you know what? I love the Guardian.
Yeah, it's
I've
great,
had a
isn't it?
few little run-ins with them, and this will probably give me another run-in with them. But one of their esteemed journalists, who's apparently worked with them for 20 years, Louise Tickle, which is kind of ironic.
Good name, isn't it?
Took up umbrage.
She's not married to Mr. Tickle, is she?
Probably.
You know, the one with the long arm.
I don't know, maybe. But long and the short of
joke
it,
there somewhere, but I'm not going
there
to
is somewhere.
Sorry.
But getting to my point, Mike, for my nominee, she took umbrage with a recent bit of correspondence which was published about an individual called Scarlett,
Yes.
who had been involved in the murder of a stranger, but had also been a cat killer.
Yeah.
Now, on my list of people to unlive, I would say cat killers go quite high.
Yeah.
So the fact that this individual had killed an individual, as well as recreating a scene from a documentary on Netflix, which I won't say the title because it's a little bit rude.
Yeah.
And they do asterisk out certain words. But had put a cat in a blender.
We can say that.
So anyway, the problem that Louise Tickle had was not with the killing of the cat, not with the murder of a complete stranger, but the fact that they'd misgendered the perpetrator of these horrendous acts.
Right.
And said, you know, I've been working with this paper for 2 decades, and you can't get it right, and they were a transgender.
Yeah.
So really is it newsworthy? That's the key.
The report of the sentence and the report of the crime referred to this person, Blake Scarlett, as a woman.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Which he isn't.
No. I don't know, Mike. I'm confused.
Yeah. Well, I do know, and that's what the Guardian, Guardian writer was concerned about. She wrote to the editor of the Guardian to say, "Why on earth are you doing this?"
Yes.
You know, their defence, in fairness to them, was that the judicial system refers to this individual as a she,
which is fair,
and therefore, but unfortunately for Blake, he's going to a male prison.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, well.
He's not going to a female prison.
Right.
He's a transgender murderer.
Yeah.
He might think he's a woman.
Yes.
He's going to a men's prison. So
Excellent.
the judicial system actually recognises him as a man.
Which is brilliant. And I think it's as it should be, in this particular instance anyway. And I think hopefully Blake Scarlett will have a most enjoyable time.
Yeah, I would imagine so. The thing that I find amazing about The Guardian, because she got a letter back from the editor by way of explanation, who basically said that, you know, like all news organisations, we respect the gender self-identifying of the person but the thing that I found even more amazing was that there were people defending the killer, saying it was so offensive that this person was being misgendered by various people calling him a man. Yeah. But they weren't offended by his crime.
I know, this is just the bizarreness.
Yeah.
But I mean,
so they're now defending
of our time.
murderous killers in order to protect some kind of ludicrous ideology.
I know. It just distracts and it takes focus off really what the fundamentals were. So, I mean, although the Guardian are usually probably more politically correct than anybody else, it's this particular issue and it's the infighting within the Guardian of one of their correspondents to fundamentally say, look, just get your house in order, the lot of you. Do this behind closed doors. Right. Why do you have to do your dirty washing in public?
Also, news reports, and also Ms. Tickle made the point that, you know, it's one thing to have a columnist that wants to write about things, one thing to have, you know, a feature writer, you know, presenting things, but a news report is a news report, and it has to have facts in it. Anyway, let's move on. Rebecca, who's your first nomination?
Well, my first nomination for you is Mr. Kellogg's.
Excellent.
It's the CEO of Kellogg's, Gary Pilnick, not another word I was going to say.
Could be Pillock.
Because
like Pillock.
his advice, so Kellogg's launched this ad in the US saying, forget chicken for dinner, have cereal. And what's great about this advert is not just any cereal, it's the super sugary Frosties, Fruit Loops.
Yeah, nice.
With a family to give your children as a replacement for dinner.
Yes.
Because, you know,
because it's cheaper.
Some demographics, you know, a lot of people are struggling anyway, regardless of that. But they're being told to have cereal instead. This is completely insane. They did a stupid Special K diet in the noughties about dropping a gene size within 2 weeks. And I lapped it up as well. We had 2 bowls of cereal.
You're the third woman this week that's told me that, you know. I didn't know about this Special K.
No, I remember
as
it.
you can see. Otherwise, I'd have been eating it for years, you know. But, apparently you're the third person that's told me they went on this Special K diet.
It was ridiculous. Fad diets aside, I mean, if that didn't teach Kellogg something, because they abandoned that diet knowing that, you know, the ideas around diet culture has changed. But when you're talking about people saving money on food, yet Kellogg's is worth about £16 billion. He himself, Gary, is worth about 3 million, I think. Like, what does he know about someone on the breadline? Exactly. Cereal's gone up 28% in the last couple of years. Like, that's an insane amount. What about sponsoring an app for people on making healthy meals for 50p? The information's out there. It's like, no, buy more of my cereal.
That doesn't make Kellogg's any money. Let's have a look at Mr. Pillock. Here he is giving his statement.
So we're advertising about cereal for dinner. If you think about the cost of cereal for a family versus what they might otherwise do, that's going to be much more affordable. Cereal for dinner is something that is probably more on trend now, and we would expect to continue as that consumer is under pressure.
I love the shamelessness of it.
Okay, I got full admission here. Okay, you're going to be so disappointed. I quite often have cereal for dinner.
No. You have it as a late night snack. It's not.
No. I'll have it for dinner. I will, and I have done that.
People will do that from time to time.
How big's the bowl, though?
I don't think
huge.
I don't think you wouldn't be sitting down with your wife and kids and giving everybody cereal for dinner. I mean, it's
didn't
one
meet
thing.
my ex-wife.
No, absolutely not.
I can't have a glass of Malbec with some Kellogg's cornflakes.
You know what? You should give it a try out.
He would sell that to you. That guy would sell it to you. He would.
He would. I'm in.
It can't be forgotten that there's a reason why he wants people to buy more cereal. It's because he'll make even more money. They actually made an advert. Have a look at this.
Oh, brilliant.
When I say cereal, you say dinner. Cereal.
Dinner!
Cereal.
Dinner! Chicken!
You can have the night off, chicken.
Oh, okay, I'll go marinate.
Cereal.
Dinner!
Cereal.
Dinner!
And is that the chicken they would have eaten?
That is amazing, yeah.
You know what? But if Tony the Tiger says it, you know,
yeah,
it's gospel.
That is dystopian.
I thought Tony the Tiger was going. Oh, hello. Here we go.
That is the biggest bowl of That's the biggest box of cereal I've ever seen.
A 20-gram serving.
A knife and fork.
Yeah, with no milk.
Bon appetit.
Don't knock it. The trouble is, it's quite hard to get it on the floor.
Oh, Michael. Seriously. When you're done, pass it down.
I was going to say,
There's your dinner sorted.
Got a bit more. This is great.
love it.
Awesome.
Start eating it with your hands.
Tim, can I get some as well, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I'm just going to pick at it. Awesome.
The thing is, I mean, I'm like you, Will. I have eaten cereal at different times of the day.
Yeah, sometimes you crave it.
I mean, I used to work overnights at talkSport, right?
Yeah.
I'd finish my job at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd go home. I'd have spaghetti bolognese and a glass of red wine.
Yeah.
7 o'clock in the morning. You know, if the maniacs from the health board came round, they'd go, look at this idiot. What's he doing? Why is he drinking, you know, a bottle of Rioja at 7 o'clock in the morning?
But this box, this box is
quite normal. Don't knock it.
That's £4, that box.
That's
it's a larger
huge.
box.
It's 1
I
kilo.
think that's around £4, and you know, the normal one.
That is a big box.
But if you're on the bread line, you won't be
keeping
buying
this.
Kellogg's,
Got a bit
will
more
you?
of a budget on this.
You
so
won't
I
even
thought.
be buying Kellogg's, so it's a bit of a stupid thing to say buy Kellogg's, because if you're really that hard up for cash and you can't afford to feed your family, you're not buying branded cereal.
Right. Well, that's a very good point, and this is very true, because the problem with Kellogg's is it's quite expensive.
Yeah.
And you can buy... So what he might be doing is actually undermining his own product.
Yeah.
Because if you are poor, you're not going to buy Kellogg's cornflakes, are you? You're going to
buy own brand
the own brand in the
wherever.
supermarket.
Yeah.
You know. But, I mean, I always say everything in moderation. I mean, if you want to have cornflakes for dinner, it's not the end of the world, but I wouldn't do it every night.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a sugary
I wouldn't
thing.
buy them from Kellogg's.
That's the dangerous bit, because, I mean, then you'll
Also,
distract
these are
from
cornflakes.
nutrition.
These are not Frosties.
Yeah.
Frosties, I mean, you're talking...
Or crunchy nut.
Yeah.
You might as
I'm
well,
sold.
you know, inject yourself with sugar.
Gosh, that's what we had as children. I mean, everyone had that every morning. Cocoa Pops, Frosties. We loved it.
Yeah. I banned my children from having any chocolate cereal unless we were on holiday.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you go to those, you know, all-inclusive resorts and the breakfast is ridiculous.
Yes.
And if you're not careful, your kids are literally eating all day.
Yes.
That's all they do.
Yes.
You fancy a hamburger, it's 4:30 in the afternoon.
They're always hungry.
But you just had lunch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, have some cereal instead. Anyway, I'm going to be busy eating this, so I might not be back for a while. And I've got a bit of a dry mouth already. This is Plank of the Week. I'm going to be bringing you something so extraordinary after this that you better not go away. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. I'm Mike Graham. I've recovered from eating all those cornflakes, and I won't be feeding myself for quite some time now. I'm rather full. But let's get on with the rest of the show. It's time for my nomination now, and I never thought I'd be nominating Willy Wonka as Plank of the Week, but it's not really Willy Wonka, it's the Willy Wonka experience. This is a story that started in Glasgow beginning of this week and ended up going around the world because it was so ridiculous, because it was one of these, like those kind of Santa shows that you see around December, where people get invited to a winter wonderland.
Grotty grotto.
Not quite what they ended up saying it was going to be. But here's what they promised in Willy Wonka Land, the Willy Wonka experience, which was in Glasgow.
Wow.
You can hear the music, it brings you all sorts of, thoughts of, I don't know whether you think about Johnny Depp or you think about the original version. But what they actually gave them when they got there was something rather different. Because what we can see here is a bit like a warehouse full of some plasticky toys, right?
The best.
Now, this cost 35 quid for parents to bring one child, right? So if you had a couple of kids, you paid £70 for this. Yeah. And that's one of the Oompa Loompas, by the way.
Is it?
And one of the highlights, or lowlights, depending on your point of view, for the people who were hired to be at this Willy Wonka experience, was that when they all arrived to dress up for the part, the guy who was named Billy Cool, who was the organiser.
Billy Cool.
C-O-U-L-L, though. Not
suspicious.
Yeah, very suspicious.
Straight away.
They were the sexy versions of Oompa Loompas that you'd often bought from Ann Summers, as opposed to from a normal, fancy dress shop.
OK, now you're selling it to me, Mike.
Yeah, but this is for children, remember?
Oh, OK.
And so parents were there literally seconds before they started to, demand their money back.
Oh, my
I'm not surprised.
And the story originally appeared in the Scottish version of the Scottish Sunday Mail. That's the Oompa Loompa there.
She looks happy.
And of course, there's nothing worse than working at a place where the parents and the kids are all in tears, demanding their money back. And the guy himself apologised and sort of said, well, I didn't really mean to rip anybody off, but he ended up having to give them all their money back.
Right.
And it's just one of the most ridiculously bad thing that anybody's ever put on.
Didn't they give them one jelly baby and about a third of a cup of lemonade?
They got one jelly baby. They had something which they thought was supposed to be recreating the sort of the chocolate fountain that you could find in restaurants. Didn't make any chocolate at all. And it was literally like walking into an empty room
I would
with
have
a couple of
loved
things.
to have seen the social media advertising for that.
Yeah.
I mean, the gap between what they promised and the reality, because you see so much of that now.
Yeah.
People sort of tailor it for Instagram and they make it look amazing.
Right.
And then you get there and it's sort of like the Fire Festival documentary on Netflix. That's what's actually...
Well, they thought it was going to look literally like that.
Oh, my goodness.
That it was going to be this amazing sort of, walk through, grotto of wonderfulness.
Grotty.
But it was grotty rather than a grotto.
I mean, that's an AI.
And this was all
image.
created by AI.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's the duping of it, isn't it? It's that darkness of what you're doing if you're advertising that and you're delivering that. But you mentioned the Fire Festival, that infamous thing where people spent millions. These were like quite affluent people indulging in a festival on an island where they thought they were going to be on a yacht with models. There's kind of some humour in it. It's never not. It's the people, who were.
And it was a sophisticated con as well.
Yeah,
it was a very
kind of in a way
con.
Interesting and almost in a way somewhat admirable that you could even con that much. But I think just looking at this Willy Wonka situation, it's like the Paris syndrome. And the Japanese have this beautiful version of Paris and how amazing it's going to be, and then they're there, and the gritty reality is something else entirely. And we do talk a lot about kids being a bit mollycoddled, wrapped in cotton wool. Well, there's your dose of reality, darling.
I mean,
this is how it really is.
I'm told a lot of the parents are still waiting to get their refunds as well, and a lot of the people who were asked to work on it haven't been paid either.
Well, the staff haven't been paid.
No,
that's really,
but how about this, right? The name of the organisation, supposedly, that this guy Billy Cool runs, is called House of Illuminati. So there's your clue.
Again,
right?
there you go.
The Illuminati, you can't be trusted around
always the Illuminati
It's
behind
always the
it, Mike.
Illuminati. So, I mean, he's now going to be going down in history, though, this guy, because the New York Times wrote about it. It's on TV in America, TV around the world. And, he's now the most famous huckster, I think, that anybody's ever seen.
Yeah.
Surely trading standards have been called in, I would.
You would have thought so, wouldn't you? You would have thought so.
I wonder how many parents actually just dropped their kids off and left anyway, just...
Well, there is that possibility.
You'd pay 65 quid for that, wouldn't you, sometimes?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Exactly right. Anyway, Howard, over to you.
Yeah, OK. Well, what's happening across the country in local authorities You know, there's so many councils now in debt.
Yes.
We're in a situation...
Going bankrupt a lot of them.
Well, exactly. And, you know, they're incredible managers. And most of them are Labour councils, by the way.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of looking at that. But I'm going to bring up Southwark Council.
Yeah.
And God bless Southwark Council. They've got a debt of about £6.7 million currently on their
That's not that much these days,
It's
is
actually
it?
not. In fact, it might be per quarter. I might have got that sort of thing. But they're asking residents now to contribute some cash for their net zero project. For their eco
net zero, you're joking.
What's the council tax for then?
Well, exactly, because they said they haven't got enough money to actually put through their eco projects.
Oh dear.
You cannot believe this is going on. And fundamentally, Southwark Council, you know, I'm afraid it's also in the Greater London area, which I'm standing for.
Yeah.
You know I'm standing for London Mayor.
I did mention it at the top of the show.
Thank you.
Are you standing for Mayor, Howard?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay. Well, this is the sort of thing we've
I'm
got to
not
look
reading
at.
out all the candidates. It's
I know, but as you know, I'm accused of being a climate change denier and all this.
I didn't know that. Crikey. And you got one of those taxis you drive around in as well.
Yes, have you seen those taxis?
Yeah,
lovely.
I have.
It does about 8 to the gallon. It's lovely.
Well, if you can get out the bus lane, you won't move at all.
Exactly. Well, I'm trying to get them into the bus lane. That's the whole thing. Yeah. But seriously, this whole point, what the cheek of the Southwark Council to ask the residents, they've actually ruined their budget. They've ruined everything like that. They can't afford to. The potholes are about 6 feet deep.
Yeah.
They're doing all these sorts of things, and they're asking, please, could you help some eco projects?
I think it's going to be a serious audit on their accounts.
Yes, exactly.
Are they actually asked? Well, I suppose it's better than some of them. I mean, some of them, like Birmingham City Council, I think, are going to just put 21% on for you next time you get a council tax bill.
Yeah.
So what are they doing, Southwark? Are they just asking if you can make a donation?
I think it's between £5 and £15 is what they're asking for every resident.
Blimey. Because I live under the aegis of Southwark Council. I haven't been asked yet, but I did have a problem with them the other week, and I had to ring them to get something sorted out. Really? And, you know, it took me 40 minutes before I actually got to speak to a proper human. I was on hold once for 20 minutes.
They were on their eco project.
Yeah, probably. And if somebody eventually answered the phone, they said, "Oh, we're very busy. We'll get someone to call you back." And I went, "I've been on hold for 20 minutes."
Yes.
And I said, "Well, they could call me back." "Oh, tomorrow." Won't be today now.
Yeah.
And it was only like 10 o'clock, right? Then they rang me back in the afternoon.
Oh, you did get a call back?
And I wasn't. I couldn't answer it because I was here.
Yeah.
And then finally they rang me sort of later on that day, and had to. Sorry, no, I rang them back. It's another 20 minutes. Eventually got to speak to a human, and he said, "I'm going to have to call you back." It just went on and on and on. Eventually it got resolved, but it was so ridiculous that you can't. You've got to fill out a form. Well, no, the form doesn't actually help. The form doesn't explain what I need you to do. So it is ludicrous.
Well, I've got some research coming out, hopefully, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, but something like in local authorities in London, that's sort of measured them for obvious reasons, 1 in 4 of them are working from home.
Yeah, I bet. That's why they don't answer the bloody phone.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Candice, over to you.
So the next one I've got, it's been all over the news. It's the farcical rollout of Google's Gemini app. I mean, this has been widely ridiculed.
Yes.
And on the one hand, you can say it's ridiculous, but on the other hand, you can kind of think that it's a bit Orwellian as well. So the particular problem people had was with its image generation tool.
Yes.
So they were asking it to create images of Nazis, for instance, but it was very clear that this image generation tool was very committed to diversity and inclusion because all of the Nazis were black.
Right.
And there's one thing we know about the Nazis. I mean, they weren't really into
certainly were not
racial
black,
diversity much.
No. In fact, it was one of their main sort of tenets of being a Nazi, wasn't it?
Exactly.
You sort of had to be an Aryan.
And then some of the questions that they would ask it, they would say, who is worse, Elon Musk or Hitler? And it would say, well, that's a very hard question to answer.
Amazing. He's asking it.
Yeah. And this is presumably why people like Elon Musk and others say that AI might actually be quite dangerous.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, you know, it's obvious that it's just reflecting the politics of Silicon Valley.
Right.
You know, the sort of like neurotic, progressive worldview that prevails there. But it's so true. You know, this is a search tool that we use to get information about the world.
Yes.
And it's completely inaccurate.
Right.
I mean, it's total misinformation.
Right.
But that's the fundamental problem of AI. AI is always going to be influenced by the politics, viewpoint, culture of the individual programmer that is actually inputting the data.
Yes.
So this clever magic, which in this alchemy, which people believe AI can do, which is it gathers and aggregates data from all sorts of different areas and then comes up with this composition. It fundamentally comes back to who's programmed it.
Yes, because that's what
exactly
it said.
right. But it also brings you into that whole realm of, you know, what stories are believable, what history is right and wrong. And because if you allow every single view, you get the wrong sense of what actually happened. Because if you think that some nutty conspiracy theory is exactly as good as an actual news report from the 1900s or something, you end up getting a mixed view of what actually happened. Let's have a look at what they did for the founding fathers. This was the AI picture. Doesn't quite look right to me. Awesome. How about the Vikings? Let's have a go at that. I mean,
they look impressive.
They do look quite scary. And finally, the Pope.
Gorgeous, just not accurate.
How about the Pope? Let's try the Pope.
Oh,
that definitely doesn't look like any Pope I've seen.
No. I don't think a woman can be Pope, right?
Here's an image of a Pope. At the moment, I don't think so.
No.
I don't know what the future holds for that.
Yeah.
It doesn't look promising.
I don't think we should trust Elon Musk, though, because let's remember, he has trashed a lot of AI when we're not really sure what his research and activity is in AI. I would be very careful of being like, it's almost comical what's happened, and he's obviously spoken out about it. But I think if we are all relying on Google when we've got a symptom to Google, if we've got a medical problem, we all go to Dr. Google. We suddenly become... Because you just wait for it to say cancer, you're going to die awfully very quickly, and it's going to be horrific. Yes. You keep searching until you get to that point. It's something in us, isn't it, where we do it. But I think the more and more we rely on technology for not necessarily AI, but anything, the more this is going to creep in, and the more, we're not going to have
You're absolutely right. And it's the same with Twitter, with this fact-checking, which they introduced, which again is so inaccurate.
A lot of the time is wrong because it's readers' notes, so it's people. It's the sort of collective view of people on Twitter.
It's like Wikipedia. Wikipedia. I mean, I've helped a number of people who've had their own biogs put up there, and there are people deliberately out there who've got editorial sort of control or capability, and they will change it literally every 5 minutes. So however much you try and correct it, and get it right, there will be people who go, no, I'm going to change it.
In defence of some aspects of AI, I'm asked to write, I'm sure we all around here write a lot of quotes for papers and newspapers. And when you're writing about the same subject again and again, I'm coming to the budget next week in terms of fuel duty. And I think, what should I write about it? And
I write my bit. So
I chuck it in there. It does come back with some very good stuff, and I've used it.
Still need to edit it, though.
Still
got to edit it.
I just worry that it's so generic, though. It just comes out with these very generic answers.
Yeah, but it also contributes to the general lack of education.
And laziness.
And common knowledge and general knowledge that people have. Because I've worked with a lot of young people who say, well, I don't need to know that, I'll just Google it. And you go, well, yeah, but you can't just Google things if you don't know what you're Googling. Surely you have to have some knowledge in your head. And a lot of people now don't think you do, because you just look it up.
You need to question the information you're getting. It's so frustrating as a journalist. It's like, I've been trained and trained to question everything, even the facts. We all have. And it's like, why aren't we questioning when we go on Google what we're searching and if what we found is actually accurate or true?
Have you ever worked for The Guardian?
No, I've worked in this building.
They have people that take the facts out of the story. No, but that's a different kind of fact checking. But very good, interesting stuff. Well, listen, we've got some more to do. We're getting our way through. Are we not surely through to the final bit already? Are we? Can we be through to the final bit already? I don't think so. Coming up, we're going to be looking at a load more planks because there's just been so much of it this week. Don't go away. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. It is your Friday night special, and this is where we decide who has been the biggest plank of this particular week. And it's the last week, of course, of February. We're now into March. Apparently it's spring already, so if you're wondering where the weather is, I don't know either. But let's talk to Will Geddes. You've got a Labour MP.
I do. What a surprise.
Yes.
What a surprise. Angela Rayner.
Angela Rayner. We haven't heard from Angela Rayner for a while.
You may not have.
She has been on here before, but not recently.
Yes. Well, she's been stealthing around, and now, unfortunately, she's broken cover.
Yeah.
And this is to do with a certain capital gains obligation, shall we say, that is due to the HMRC for a property that she owned, which was a council right to buy.
Yes.
That she had in 2015, that she
bought it
was
in
her primary.
2007, didn't she?
2007, sold in 2015, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And at the time, she was married, and her husband did have an alternate property.
Yeah.
But claiming, as we all know with HMRC and capital gains, that if it is your own principal property that you live in, that you are not obligated to pay capital gains. However, there are a few disputes alleging that she wasn't using it as her principal property, and she's trying to evade paying capital gains. Now, what's also quite interesting about this is that apparently one of her manifestos is to push forward the removal of capital gains payment on properties.
Well, no, it's to remove...
As I understand it.
No, my understanding is it's to remove the discount that you got to buy the council house in the first place.
Okay.
She made 48,000 quid. But one of the reasons she made 48,000 quid was because she bought it for hardly any money.
Exactly.
Because if you're living in a council house and you've got the right to buy...
Yes.
You get basically a break on what you pay for it, right?
Absolutely.
So what she's trying to do now is to make that break less good for the buyer.
Yes.
So it will be a smaller amount of discount than she got.
Yeah.
So that's why she's been called a hypocrite.
So, yeah, I think it's all a bit nefarious.
Yeah.
To be honest.
The funny thing is that the story started on Sunday. It was first published by the Mail on Sunday. And everyone was kind of shooing it away, saying, no, this week the story's all about Lee Anderson, nothing to do with Angela Rayner.
Yeah.
And the Labour Party kept trying to ignore it, but the story kept going.
Yeah.
And Guido Fawkes, in fact, kept sort of hammering away and produced a birth certificate for the child that she has. As a journalistic enterprise, you could also get hammered by the lefties. So this is an outrage, invasion of privacy. He's like, well, journalistically, you're allowed to do it for a story where both different properties were listed. And, you know, it turns out, we believe, that the child lived with the address that the husband was at.
Yes.
And people since have been interviewed to say there was never a child that lived here.
Yeah.
So it's all very questionable.
It's all very
And what was
questionable.
really funny was that at one point during the week, the Labour Party said all questions to do with this should go to Keir Starmer's office. Keir Starmer's office then said all questions to do with this should go to Angela Rayner's office. Angela Rayner's office said, no, all questions to do with this should go to the Labour Party press office.
Yeah.
So they're all over the place.
Yeah, and I think this is why it's of particular interest for me, because it's the fact that you're not getting any transparency. You're not getting any honest answers from anybody on this. And inevitably, like everybody would speculate, if you're not getting a straight answer, there's a bigger story under it.
And it's the story's just not going away.
Exactly.
And so eventually she will have to come out and say something about it.
And she's not going to look good.
And I mean, you know, she could have made a simple mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
It's always possible.
We've all done it.
Yeah, it's always possible. I forgot that I didn't live there. You know,
and I forgot that I owed any money.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the dear old voter is, you know, who do they choose that's honest anymore? And that's what's going on out there.
Exactly.
I know a good candidate for mayor, though.
Let's have a look at Angela Rayner when she was on Question Time.
The vote is quite clear, but as a Member of Parliament, I have a responsibility for British jobs, British workers.
Your job is to represent the public, the people who elect you. Start doing your job. If you don't like it, clear off. Simple as that.
You know, she once appeared on Question Time, and I tweeted something about her appearance on Question Time, and she blocked me, and I've never been able to see her tweets ever since.
Oh, really?
She's quite...
You're not missing anything, Mike.
Oh.
No.
Mike, what's mad about this story is that only last year she was saying, you know, people should have the right to buy their, you know, their council home if they've been in there a considerable amount of time.
Right.
That's what she wants to do with this policy. Well, she was in that house, from my understanding, 8 years. Is that a considerable amount of time? That's what I would like to know from her. I'd like her to come out and say, I think 10 years is a considerable amount of time. Like, be honest.
What's the statute
say the fact.
on it?
And then maybe it won't look as horrific as
Well, this is it. In
as
this
it
day and
does.
age, just come out and explain. You know, because there may be a perfect...
It's just slippery as hell.
Labour
It
has
just doesn't look good.
always
No.
hated the right to buy policy. That was Thatcher's policy. They've
Yeah.
never liked it, but yet you see some of them did benefit from it.
And the funny thing is that all week, you know, I've been getting abuse from the usual Labour lefties saying this is not a story. You know, what's wrong with a woman from the left being able to make a profit? They missed the whole point of it.
Yes,
you know, they don't get. It's not hypocritical to make money. It's hypocritical to say you don't like a policy and then benefit from it, isn't it? Pretty straightforward.
It's not that. It's running distraction on you, Mike.
It really is.
That's all it is.
Anyway, Rebecca, I'm delighted to say is going to give us Prince Harry.
Yes.
It's got to be done.
I can't deliver him in person, but
Thank God for that.
For you, my nomination is Prince Harry, who has lost his case against the Home Office and the High Court this week. So poor old Harry, and I do actually like Harry. I actually feel very sorry for him.
You?
Yes, and you can hold me to account for this. I think he's a very unhappy, upset man who just has to win.
He's a baby.
Who has to win it. Well, there's lots of grown men who can behave
I'll take
like
your word
that.
for that.
No one in this room, though. No one here. But he...
Sorry for your troubles.
Exactly.
As we know, when he left the royal family and the UK moved to America, he's still...
there's the words you were looking for there. Left.
Left.
Yeah.
Of his own free will. He wasn't
Exactly.
forced. He wasn't, he wasn't forced. He wanted to still have the police protection and the security and paid by the UK taxpayer. And he's obviously lost that situation, but he's going to appeal it. And that's why I think he should be a nomination. there's so many better ways to spend money, to spend his time. There's a lot going on with the royal family right now. Not to be beating the same drum. We know that he's sensitive to, obviously, protecting his family, but don't write in your autobiography how many people you killed in Afghanistan. And then you're like, oh, I wonder why the Al-Qaeda have a hit on me. Oh, but can the UK taxpayer, in the cost of living crisis, fund it for me? It's like he hasn't joined up.
I mean, he actually offered to pay for it himself. It's not even about that. I think he just wants the status of flying in. No, of course you can't do it. Because they're not for hire. So it's not necessarily about the money so much as it is about him just wanting to have everything that the rest of his family's got, even though he's given up on them and he doesn't want to be any part of it. But, well, also, people who are defending him in this are saying things like, oh, surely he deserves to be protected. Well, he will be.
He can be.
He just has to apply every time he comes, 28 days before he comes, and no doubt they'll give him protection, right?
No, they won't actually, Mike. What happens is the threat assessments for any visiting principal head of state is done by a group called RAVEC, which is a royalty and VIP executive committee. And what they do is they'll assess it, the threats against the royals, threats against politicians, people in the public eye, and their assessment of Harry, from what I understand, is that he lives in the States. He has a private security team. In fact, he took his personal PPO from the Royalty and Specialist Protection team with him and recruited him directly. His security team, as far as I know, they're pretty good. They're not my team, so they're not excellent, but they're probably very good. And when he comes over, he will have a security advisor attached to him. When he goes into the bosom of the royal family at events, he will have the fabric and the perimeter of security provided for the royal family by proxy. It's a bit like if you went out for dinner with George Clooney, you'd have all his security with you. You'd have all his security. So by proxy, you'd be protected as well. The same applies to Harry. So
like last time he came,
it's economy, it's economics, and it's vanity. And I think the vanity that he's now not a member of the royal family in terms of working, and economic, because it's probably costing him about $5 million a year for his private security.
Apparently, it's really expensive.
Has he got your card?
He should do.
The point is,
I'm more expensive, though.
The last time he came here, he ended up staying in a hotel. So how would that have worked in terms of
that works really well. I mean, I've brought heads of state into this country and to various parts of the world, or former heads of state, I should claim. And it's pretty straightforward. You can run the whole journey management. You can work with the hotels. Many hotels are already geared up to take people of significance, obviously, on board, and they accommodate the security team. I mean, if the security team is professional, they already have existing relationships. It's not difficult, Mike. It's not difficult.
But he's now spent £1 million on this case of his own money, right? I mean, if you were his wife, you'd be going, would you stop, please?
She may have driven him to it.
Stop. Well, she might have done.
Please, can we not Meghan Bash,
but
please?
Listen,
could you do a Meghan impression, please,
I could do, Harry, stop wasting all our money, Harry. She doesn't think he's ever going to lose one, right? But the bottom line is, the people of the world have now completely turned against this pair of complete numpties. And here's proof. Have a look at this.
We're completely out of money.
Maybe it's time we dip into your fortune from Suits.
There is no fortune from Suits. I don't know what to do. How are we going to pay for school for Archie? Oh, God. We're going to have to move back in with your family. Why did you move back here anyway? It was ultimately a tough call, but there were a lot of factors to consider.
We couldn't get jobs and we ran out of money. We ate chicken out of bowls and rode in big cars full of smelly people to something called work. Every day was a new nightmare.
At least they had chicken, not cereal.
Love Family Guy.
Do you know, this is unknowns to me. It was found by Chuck. It's a cartoon show called The Prince, which is just about Harry and Meghan.
Family Guy. Is it Seth?
No, it's on HBO, and it's a different show, and it's just about them, and it just rips it out of them every single week. So you've got to find it. But the trouble is, right, here's a guy who says, my children won't feel at home in Britain unless they can be protected. Well, maybe you shouldn't have moved them out of Britain then to a country where they had 40,000 deaths by gunshot wound last year alone. And you think you've moved to a safe place? He wants to complain about Britain? Get lost, mate. That's what I would say. Coming up, my final nomination will be an old favourite. It's not Sadiq Khan. But they make television. That's all I'm saying. This is Plank of the Week. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. We are here, of course, every single Friday for your delectation to tell you about all the idiocy and plankery that's been going on all week. And it's time for my final nomination. And I'm afraid it's going to be the BBC. who are quite often in my sights here on this show, because it's been a bad week for them as well. Latterly, they got told by a former Attorney General who was doing an investigation into their news-gathering activities that they are basically anti-Semitic. Because they've done so many things which are misrepresentative of the conflict that's going on in Gaza. But I'm not nominating them for that. I'm nominating them for another report that came out into what they did with Huw Edwards. You might remember last year the big Huw Edwards scandal, where the BBC got a telephone call sometime in May from a family saying, you know, we've got a rather troubled teenager who has been sending pictures of a slightly inappropriate nature and a sexual nature to Huw Edwards, who has paid him £35,000 over the course of 3 years.
Wowza.
Right? And the teenager in question had been probably what you would regard as underage before when it all started, you know. So a horrendous story. What did the BBC do with it? Nothing. They decided to try and call them a couple of times, and when they didn't answer, they just gave up. And nothing happened for about 6 weeks. They didn't bother passing it up the chain. They didn't bother informing Huw Edwards. They didn't bother telling anybody in senior roles at BBC that this had happened. And it was only because the family, with such frustration, ended up going to the Sun newspaper, who published the story without naming Huw Edwards, and that finally the BBC had to start doing something about it. And it was Huw Edwards' own wife, and they still wouldn't name anybody. It was Huw Edwards' own wife who actually outed him and said, you know, he's suffering from terrible mental, you know, trauma, all the rest of it. And he hasn't worked since, but still on the BBC payroll. And this is a guy who's making about £500,000 a year. Nobody really thinks that he's going to come back to work, but nobody knows when he's going to stop being paid. And this is basically our money. You know, I don't feel sorry for Huw Edwards. I know that's what everybody's supposed to say. Oh, it's terrible for him. Well, it's not actually. He's been getting £500,000 a year for basically not doing anything. Meanwhile, there's a troubled family who are saying they're devastated by what happened and very disappointed. The BBC finally apologised to them, but actually, you know, they've behaved absolutely disgracefully. And just to show you how angry people have got, here's Kevin O'Sullivan getting angry.
Get rid of Huw Edwards. We don't want to pay £675,000 a year for somebody who's doing nothing, OK?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much says it all, really.
£700,000 a year.
Well, I think he actually took a £125,000 pay cut. Because when there was all that furore, there was a lot of furore about how much people were getting paid. But he's the highest paid BBC employee after Gary Lineker.
I was going to say, Gary Lineker still
he took 125,000 pay cut. People are going, sorry, you took 125,000 of a pay cut?
Yeah.
Willingly.
And he's got a pension pot.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So it's going to be huge.
I would have said the BBC might win this on any normal week, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to not give it to the BBC because I'm going to have to give it to Prince Harry. Because Prince Harry has got to be the biggest plank this week. So well done. Hazza. I call him Harry the Herbert. I refuse to call him Prince Harry because he doesn't want to be in the royal family, so why should we call him Prince Harry? So, thank you very much indeed to Howard, to Candice, to Will, to Rebecca. We'll be back same time next week. Coming up shortly, a little bit later on tonight, 11:30, it's The World According to Mike Graham. See you then.